Somebody please, my son, he's drowning. The billionaire's voice cracked with desperation as his young boy thrashed in the water. Guests froze on the deck, horrified but unmoving, terrified of ruining their gowns, their suits, their reputations. Not one dared to leap. Then, from the crowd, a maid clutching her baby stepped forward. What happened next silenced the entire estate and left the billionaire forever changed. The Hamilton estate stretched across acres of pristine gardens and fountains, but on that summer afternoon, the heart of attention was the pool, vast, shimmering, lined with marble statues. Guests gathered around with champagne glasses, their laughter spilling into the golden light dot. It was Charles Hamilton's annual charity gala, an event that showcased his wealth as much as his generosity. Beside him stood his only son, a boy of 8, restless in his crisp suit, tugging at his father's hand. "Go play, Ethan," Charles said distractedly, waving him toward the pool where other children splashed under the watch of servants. He returned to his guests, sipping champagne, never imagining the horror that would soon unfold. Ethan wandered to the pool's edge, staring at his reflection. He reached for a toy boat floating nearby, but in one sudden slip, his small foot skid against the marble, and with a splash, he plunged into the deep water dot for a heartbeat. No one noticed. The string quartet played on, glasses clinked, conversations hummed. Then came the scream. "He's drowning!" Heads whipped toward the pool. Ethan flailed, his tiny arms thrashing desperately. His mouth opened, swallowed water, sank, rose, sank again. His terrified cries filled the air. Charles dropped his glass. "Ethan!" he roared, rushing forward. But the guests, men in tailored suits, women in silk gowns, froze at the edge. They gasped, clutched their pearls, but not one stepped. "In Dot, help him!" Charles shouted, his voice breaking. But no one moved. No one dared. Among the staff lining the back of the terrace stood Amara, a maid barely 25, holding her infant daughter against her chest. She had come to work that morning despite exhaustion. Every penny she earned went toward diapers and milk. She had planned to remain invisible, as always. But now, as Ethan's cries pierced the air, she felt her heart pound. She glanced at her baby, swaddled in a faded blanket. For a split second, she hesitated. Then she kissed her child's forehead, set her gently into the arms of another maid nearby, and without another thought, leapt. Gasp erupted as Amara dove into the water, her uniform ballooning, her arms slicing forward. She reached Ethan. Just as he slipped under, his tiny hands clawing at the blue. She wrapped her arms around him, kicking furiously, dragging his limp body toward the surface. "Hold on, baby. I've got you," she whispered. With one arm around him, she fought toward the edge, sputtering, her legs trembling with effort. Finally, she pushed him up to the deck. "Breathe, Ethan, breathe," she cried. For a moment, silence. Then Ethan coughed, water spilling. From his mouth, his small chest heaving. The crowd erupted in gasps with relief. Charles dropped to his knees, cradling his son, tears streaking his face. He looked up at the maid, drenched, trembling, her chest heaving with exhaustion. She was still on her knees, water dripping onto the marble, their eyes locked. The room, once filled with laughter, now held only the sound of her ragged breath. But before Charles could speak, whispers began. She risked her baby's life. She jumped in with no thought. "She's just a maid." The murmurs stung sharper than the chlorine burning Amara's eyes. She lowered her gaze, expecting dismissal, perhaps even punishment for stepping out of line. Instead, Charles rose slowly, his son in his arms, and walked to her. The crowd parted like water. He stopped before her, his voice breaking. "You saved. My boy, you saved my life." He bent, the billionaire bent, and pulled her to her feet. With his free arm, he embraced her, his tuxedo soaking against her drenched uniform. Gasps filled the air. Some guests clapped hesitantly. Others lowered their eyes in shame. "From this moment," Charles declared, his voice carrying across the marble terrace, No one will ever look down on this woman again. She had the courage none of you did. She has my respect and my eternal gratitude. Applause erupted. Guests who had stood frozen moments earlier now cheer, their shame drowned by admiration. Amara trembled, tears mixing with pool water, whispering, "Thank you, sir." "I only did what any mother would do." Charles looked at her baby, still safe in the arms of another maid, and nodded. "And from today, you will never struggle as a mother again." News of the moment spread like fire. Guests had filmed it. Within hours, videos flooded social media. Headlines read, "Billionaire son saved by Maid," and "Courage over wealth." Poor Maid becomes hero. Offers poured in. Strangers donated to support her. Charles Hamilton announced publicly that Amara's daughter's education and care would be fully funded. But most importantly, the world saw something undeniable. In a courtyard of the wealthy, where fear and hesitation ruled, the poorest person carried the greatest courage. Years later, Ethan would tell the story himself at graduations, at interviews, always repeating the same line. "Everyone froze, but a maid holding her baby saved me." That day proved something powerful. Courage doesn't belong to wealth. Courage belongs to love. When everyone else hesitated, one woman with nothing but her baby in her arms leapt without fear, and in doing so, reminded the world that dignity and strength often live in the most overlooked hearts. What do you think? Would you have leapt into the water or stood frozen like the rest? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more cinematic stories of dignity, justice, and hidden heroes.